Hello again. Well, back with episode 4. Last time we looked at the fuel injectors. This time we're going to see what we can do about spark. So, bit of background. When I bought all this Triumph stuff with the intention of doing the GS750, I wasn't decided about whether I would try and use the Triumph coils. I thought I might just carry on with the original Suzuki coils and points ignition, or maybe convert it to electronic ignition, because I thought it might be quite complicated to do. Since then I've done a bit of research, and now that we're working with the GS550 instead, I've done a bit more research, and it looks like you really have to use these Triumph individual stick coils. I think it's going to be very important. Because obviously with the original gear you're dealing with wasted spark with a single coil driving two spark plugs, which is fine when you've got carburetors, or even with fuel injection if you have a camshaft and a crankshaft sensor. But because the Triumph system only uses a crankshaft position sensor, I think it tests sparks because obviously it might know that cylinders 1 and 4 are at top dead center, but it won't know which one is on the compression stroke and which one is then on the exhaust stroke. So it needs to know this to be able to inject fuel at the right time. So I suspect, and I'm not 100% sure about this, but I suspect it'll test spark on, for instance, cylinder number 1, and if that doesn't result in acceleration of the engine, it'll assume then that it wasn't that cylinder that was ready for a spark, so it'll then attempt it again on the next crankshaft rotation. So I think, I'm not sure, it's either going to do that or something similar but with the fuel injection, but I'm not 100% sure. So at the end of the day though, that means in a wasted spark system you won't be able to do that. So I think we need to have one coil per plug and let the fuel map control the ignition advance, and just do it all through the ECU. So that's my plan. Obviously these they don't fit on an air-cooled cylinder head very well. So I've come up with this, which is an extension. Now I have no idea if this is going to work. We're just going to have to see. We're going to have to find out. I don't know if this is detrimental to the engine in any way, or to the coils, or to the ECU. I'm just going to try it and see what happens. But this is basically NGK plug cap with a bit of high tension cable, and I've got a little brass insert in here which has got the little nipple that fits into the you can actually see it if you take this, if you take that off, that's where they fit. That's where your spark plug is attached. It's just got a couple of little spring-loaded wires that grip onto the M4 thread on the end of a standard spark plug. I have not put a thread on that. Instead, I've just put some little grooves in it, which should work just as well. So that obviously fits into there in the same way that a spark plug would. And then there's a plastic insulator around it that goes in the rubber cap. And I've just got a cable tie holding it all together. This is just a sort of prototype to see if it works. If it does, I'll make something a bit more sort of engineered. I might use more than one cable tie because I've noticed it doesn't hold onto the wire all that well, but it does work. It does fit in where a spark plug should be. It takes a bit of shoving to get it in though, because the rubber is quite a tight fit. So I'll have to do something about that. But it does go in, it does make contact. We do have continuity through the core, and I can't see a reason why it won't work. We'll just have to see. But obviously the idea here is I can mount multiple stick coils under the tank and have the leads come off to the relevant spark plugs. And then I'm using the coils that the ECU is expecting to see, and in theory it should all work. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Yeah, on that subject though, these coils are expecting resistor plugs. So the standard TT600 spark plugs have 5 kilo ohm resistors, which is quite handy because these plug caps also have 5 kilo ohm resistance, whereas the standard BADS NGK spark plugs are non-resistor type plugs. So we are compensating for the lack of a resistor in the plug by having the resistor in the plug cap. So it's also worth noting with this type, you can remove the resistors from these. I discovered that the other day while I was trying to work out how this was all going to go together. So yeah, unfortunately, when I test these without this extension, there will be no resistors in the circuit, so I don't want to run it too long. I don't believe it'll cause damage to anything. I think there's more risk from using a resistor plug when you're not supposed to than there is from not using a resistor plug when you are supposed to. I believe from a little bit of internet research. And this is my sort of test cylinder head, just a bit of aluminium's offcut. I've just tapped some holes in, stick 4 plugs in, and I've got a nice big old 8mm bolt, so I can get a decent earth onto that, and then I can, you know, observe what's going on with the actual spark plugs themselves. So yeah, easy to make and should work quite well. So yeah, so the plan is now to put all this together, connect all the wiring up, get that crankshaft rotor spinning up again with the sensor applied. So when I do that, I'm not going to plug the laptop into it again through the OBD port, because we've already established that the sensor and rotor situation works and it reads the right RPM and the fuel injectors are working, so we don't need to check all of that. All I want to see is spark out of those spark plugs, 3 of which will be connected directly to the stick coils, 1 of which will be connected to this extension. So yeah, we'll put it all together, get it spinning and see what happens, and hopefully we see some life out of these spark plugs. And if we do, we can then move on to the next episode, where we're going to have a look at mounting the crankshaft sensor and rotor and all of that into the crankcase, and where it's going to live, how we're going to create some adjustment if we need it, and whether it's all going to fit in correctly. So that'll be the next thing, but for now let's see if we can get some spark out of these spark plugs. And if we do, I feel like we've got a working wiring harness, a working fuel injection system, a working ignition system, and I feel we've got a good chance of actually putting together an engine that runs. Anyway, let's go check it out. Okay, so we're back in the machine shop again. Everything's set up as it was previously when we tested the fuel injectors. Only this time we're going to see if we can get some spark out of these spark plugs. Yeah, not much else to do. I'm running it off a battery this time instead of the universal power supply, just because I'm not sure what the amp draw needs to be, and we know a battery would work. So yeah, without any messing about, let's just get into it. Right, that was the idle air control, so let's just get this thing spinning. Yep, there we go, we've got some spark. I'll zoom in a bit. Clearly got spark there. I won't run this for very long, but yeah, I can still hear the injectors firing. We've definitely got spark, so we'll move on to working out how we're going to fit all of this into the engine. Right, so we know where we are now. We've got spark, we know it's all going to work, everything's looking okay. Only a few small issues still need to be resolved. One other thing that's still a little unknown is, with that rotor diameter being quite small, is it going to be affected by RPM? Is that going to cause any issues with it reading correctly? Once I've made an aluminium hub for it, and we're not relying on the sort of temporary 3D printed hub, I'll stick it in the miller and spin up the spindle, and I can get it to a higher speed, and we can just double check that that's all working correctly. The other issue is timing, because it's replacing the original GS 550 rotor. It's got no timing marks on it, so we are going to figure out how the ignition timing relates to the datum point on that wheel, so we know how to install it and all of that. So what I did with everything all set up already was just get out the timing light and have a look and see where our spark is happening and how it relates to our top dead center. It was a bit of a tricky one because it doesn't seem to be quite the same as they say in the service manual. The service manual says the extra tooth portion of the wheel relates directly to top dead center for cylinders 1 and 4, which it doesn't, because, well, this is it. I had a look online and I found some pictures to help me work all of this out. So in this first image we are looking at the alternator for the Triumph TT600 with the Sprag clutch and the rotor for the timing behind it. Here we can actually clearly see the keyway where it locates to the end of the crankshaft. I've drawn a line through it as close as I can to something that looks reasonably centered, and it goes through, I don't know how clearly you can see that, but it goes through the center of the large tooth on the timing rotor. So there's the large gap, there's your large tooth. It seems to be going through the center of that. So what's that telling us? That's telling us that this keyway is aligned to that tooth there. Now, according to the Triumph service manual, that should line up to top dead center. So we would then expect to see on the end of the crankshaft, we should be seeing a keyway lined up to top dead center that this would align with. Now, here's a picture of the crankshaft, and as you can see, there's the keyway. It's not aligned to top dead center for cylinders 1 and 4. It's 90 degrees from top dead center. So this wasn't what I was expecting to see, but we can work around that. Now, I can't tell exactly where that angle is, but it looks to me like about 90 degrees. So I'm going to work on that assumption for now. Now, let's take a look at the rest of the engine. So here we've got a side view of the Triumph TT600 engine. Now, that's the location of the sensor for the crankshaft position. I tried to measure that angle between the sensor and top dead center effectively, and it's a photograph. It's quite hard. It's not taken from exactly square on this face, so I came up with about 35 degrees based on just basically measuring it. But if we add that to the other 90 degrees that we know is the other 90 degrees between that keyway and top dead center, so we know the large tooth is sitting here at this point, we get a total of 125 degrees between the crankshaft sensor and the large tooth when we are at top dead center. So that gives us a sort of datum we can work from when it comes to timing the GS 550 engine. We'll have a look and see how that compares to some images that I captured using the timing light. So here's a video from captured using the timing light. Obviously there's a pretty serious rolling shutter effect, so it's quite difficult to get crisp, clear images. But I did this at 120 frames per second, so it's as high as my mobile phone can go 240 frames per second. So it's about as high as my mobile phone can go, and that's then slowed down quite a lot, so you can see kind of what's going on there. If we take a still from that, and then compare that to our diagram, that was the position of the crankshaft position sensor, right, in relation to the center of the large tooth, it was 110 degrees. Now it looked to me like the sensor was pretty much centered on that gap, but it's not easy to tell, and it's very difficult to photograph. But that's how it looked to me. If I add the 11 degrees of ignition advance that was applied at the time, we know this because TuneECU was displaying the ignition advance on the front page when I previously checked, while we were checking the injectors and getting them working. So we know what the ignition advance was. It was 11 degrees. So if we add that to the 110, that gives us top dead center angle between the large tooth and top dead center of 120 degrees. So here we get 125 degrees, and there we get 120 degrees. Not quite the same, but pretty close. Now, I think this one, there's probably more error in this method because it's really, it's not a very accurate way of working something out. I think the fact that we observed this directly at the engine or at the lathe, I think that tells me that that's probably more accurate. So I'm going to go with 120 degrees from that round to a marking for top dead center. So I'll just put a center punch point there, and then going forward we know how to align this to the end of the crankshaft, so that we can get the ignition timing correct, and put the sensor in the correct location. So we first need to determine where we want the sensor to go, then we need to work out where this needs to be positioned then, and where to drill the dowel hole in this so that it's on the correct position on the end of the crankshaft. So, but that'll come in a bit. We'll get to that soon. One other thing, you've got an insane girl. One other thing that needs to be that I had a look at was this whole way, the way that the TT600 ECU can work out which cylinder is on compression and which cylinder is on exhaust strokes just off the crankshaft position. So I noticed cylinders 1 through 3 are all sparking every second revolution, as you'd expect, but cylinder 4 was sparking every revolution. So I think that what the ECU does is it sparks every revolution and waits to see crankshaft acceleration, and then from that it works out at which point cylinder 4 was then on the compression stroke and obviously ignited. Therefore it can work out where it is on the wheel, in the cycle for the cylinders, and it knows when so it probably estimates or guesses and then updates itself once it's got some feedback from cylinder number 4. So that seems to be the way it works, but that then once again agrees with the fact that to use the Triumph system, you absolutely have to have separate coils for each plug. You can't use the original wasted spark setup, because otherwise the ECU will never be able to work out which cylinders at which part of the combustion cycle. So yeah, it's quite a lot happening here in this video. We've worked out quite a lot of stuff. I feel like it's been a fairly successful little venture, and we're now heading to the point where I can start actually getting an engine together. I think I'm going to paint the engine. I haven't decided what with yet. I want it in black, so I'm considering getting some of that Cerakote stuff and having a go with that, or maybe bronze even might look good. So before I start doing that though, I'm obviously going to have to make whatever modifications need to be done. So I think that's what we'll be looking at in the next video. You know, how we're going to get the crankcase modified to get everything to fit in there. Obviously I like to do 3D printed tests and mock-ups first, and then also at the same time we want to machine the aluminium rotor hub for the or possibly even a whole new rotor. I don't know yet, haven't decided. We'll see soon enough. Anyway, thanks for watching.